Micah, remember we started on Micah yesterday. So we can continue from chapter 18. Micah and the tribe of Dan. Remember, I also mentioned briefly about the tribe of Dan in the beginning? Dan was allotted a certain amount of land by Joshua, care of Moses. And so it was Dan, the tribe of Dan's responsibility to capture all that land. But they got complacent. They didn't want to override the Amorites or any of the other tribes that were there in the promised land. So they kind of let them be, and so they were stuck living only in the mountains. So there was not very good area to do agriculture and stuff. So we're going to see what happened with these people from the tribe of Dan, what they did to fix the problem, which again goes to show about the corruption that was going on in the whole nation of Israel at that time. Okay, here we go. Chapter 18. There was no king in Israel at that time. In those days, the tribe of Dan was looking for territory to claim and settle in because they had not yet received any land of their own among the tribes of Israel. 2. So the people of Dan chose 5 qualified men out of all the families in the tribe and sent them from the towns of Zorah and Eshtaol with instructions to explore the land and spy on it. When they arrived in the hill country of Ephraim, they stayed at Micah's house. While they were there, they recognized the accent of the young Levite. So they went up to him and asked, "What are you doing here? Who brought you here?" He answered, "I have an arrangement with Micah, who pays me to serve him as priest." They said to him, "Please ask God if we are going to be successful on our trip." The priest answered, "You have nothing to worry about. The Lord is taking care of you on this trip." So we have a couple of bad things going on here already. The spies, the 5 spies either knew of the Levite from a previous encounter or they recognized from his dialect that it belonged to a different tribe. After learning that he is installed as a priest, remember, a fact that seems to bring no surprise, again indicating that anything had become acceptable during this time. The men from Dan assumed that as clergy, he can perform the role of a fortune teller. The Bible does not record that the priest Jonathan even asked God before offering a confirmation and sending the men on their way. He gives his sanction in the form of such an ambiguous expression that whether the mission triumphed or failed, they could not blame him for giving them false encouragement. So you said, you know, the Lord is taking care of you on this trip. That really doesn't mean much. And he didn't even ask God. He just said it out of his own will. So literally, what he literally said was, "Your way is before the Lord," meaning only that the Lord is aware of their course. It is a very extremely innocuous reply. Doesn't mean much. So let's continue. So let me see here. Hold on, please. Yeah, I got a couple of notes here. Now, the priests and their assistants were all members of the tribe of Levi. This is back in Numbers chapter 3. They were to serve the people, teach them how to worship God, and perform the rituals involved in the worship services, both at the tabernacle in Shiloh and in the designated cities, right, throughout the land. But this disobedient priest showed disrespect for God in actually at least 3 different ways. First of all, he performed his duties in a house. Priestly duties were to be performed only in the tabernacle or a designated city. This requirement was intended to prevent God's laws from being changed. So that was the first thing he did wrong. And then after that, he carried idols with him. That's a no-no. And then 3, He claimed to speak for God when he had not inquired of God and God had not spoken through him. So you can just imagine what's going on right there. Let's continue. 7. So the 5 men left and went to the town of Laish. They saw how the people there lived in security, like the Sidonians. They were a peaceful, quiet people with no argument with anyone. They, they had all they needed. Now, let me pause here for a second. Laish, which is going to end up being the city of Dan. If you have any map with you, you notice in the very, 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 very upper section of the nation of Israel, way even above the Sea of Galilee. So they were very, very far away. So they travel a long distance. They travel a long distance away, the 5 men from Dan. So let's can talk more about these people from Laish, which turned out being the people that are going to be destroyed. And then Dan, the people of Dan, would take over the town. They were a peaceful, quiet people with no argument with anyone. They had all they needed. They lived far away from the Sidonians and had no dealings with any other people. So Laish was populated by citizens from the city of Sidon in Phoenicia, near the coast. This colony had not retained close ties with its mother country, and because its location was sheltered and remote, the people of Laish saw no need to maintain high level of security. That to all appearances, this passive group of people was ripe for the picking, for lack of a better term. In the spiritual life, we need to maintain a constant awareness of the forces that would seek to rob us of our peace, never settling into false illusions of safety. Okay, let's continue now. 8. When the 5 men returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, the people asked them what they had found out. Come on, they replied. Let's attack Laish. We saw the land and it's very good. Do not stay here doing nothing. Hurry. Go on in, take it over. When you get there, you will find that the people do not suspect a thing. It is a big country. It has everything a person could want, and God has given it to you. So 600 men from the tribe of Dan left Zorah and Eshtaol ready for battle. They went up and camped west of Kiriath Jearim in Judah. That is why the place is still called the Camp of Dan. They went on from there and came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. So we're going to talk more about Micah right there in a second. Let me turn my pager. Okay. In the hill country of Ephraim. So this is, in case you guys are wondering, this is just northwest, kind of north of Jerusalem, that area, the mountains. And it's still a significant away from Sea of Galilee, which was even south of this area they're going to go to. So they've been traveling back and forth already a good amount of time. Okay, let me just look here. Okay, let's continue. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy on the country around Laish said to their companions, did you know that here in one of these houses there is a wooden idol covered with silver? There are also other idols and an ephod. What do you think we should do? So they went into Micah's house, where the young Levite lived, and asked the Levite how he was getting along. Meanwhile, the 600 Danite soldiers ready for battle were standing at the gate. The 5 spies went straight on into the house and took the wooden idol covered with silver, the other idols, and they also took the ephod, while the priest stayed in the gate with the 600 armed men. When the men went into Micah's house and took the sacred objects, the priest asked them, what are you doing? They told him, keep quiet. Don't say a word. Come with us and be our priest and advisor. Wouldn't you rather be a priest for a whole Israelite tribe than for the family of one man? This made the priest very happy. So he took the sacred objects and went along with them. So when the priest finally figures out what is going on, he is surprised. But it doesn't take him long to recognize a break when he sees one. So he forsakes Micah without even a backward glance for a position of greater prestige and power. As a theoretical representative of the Lord, he should have risen above his own selfish ambition and spoken out against the obvious theft that was going on. But he was not a pious man, and he was not living a righteous life either, for that matter. Now, a little bit more here that remember, an ephod, if you recall, is a ceremonial vest worn by a priest. That's what an ephod is. And let me see. Yeah, let's continue from 21 right over here. They turned around and started off with their children, their livestock, and their belongings going ahead. They had traveled a good distance from the house when Micah called his neighbors out for battle. They caught up with the Danites and shouted at them. The Danites turned around and asked Micah, "What's the matter? Why all this mob?" Micah answered, "What do you mean, what's the matter? You take my priest and the gods that I made and walk off? What have I got left?" The Danites told him, "You had better not say anything else unless you want these men to get angry and attack you. You and your whole family would die." Then the Danites went on. Micah saw that they were too strong for him, so he turned and went back home. So, something of irony here. The valuables are placed in front of the company of fighting men, in case Micah should try to attack and retrieve his own property, right? He does, and at first, the Danites pretend innocence. But when they suggest that if he persists, something bad might happen to him, Micah suddenly comprehends that he has bitten off more than he can chew. If these warriors and their families did not hesitate to rob him, they might just as easily murder him. And complaining of unscrupulous treatment to unscrupulous men, and just simply is going to invite more of the same. So this is the irony of it all. Micah, in other words, became a victim of his own depravity. He has he has placed so much in store in his sacred objects that when they are taken away, he has a serious problem. However, Micah stole a great sum of money from his own mother without any compunction. Now the tables have been turned, so he can see how it feels to have things stolen from under him. It's just a way of retribution, you know. So let me see. So Micah made idols and hired a priest to run his household religion, right? When the men of Dan took his idols and priest, nothing remained. What an empty spiritual condition, you can imagine. An idol is anything that takes God's place in a person's life. Some people invest all their energy in the pursuit of money, success, possessions, or a career. If these idols are taken away, only an empty shell of a life is left. The only way to protect yourself against such loss is to invest your life in the living God, whom you can never, ever lose. Okay. 27. After the Danites had taken the priest and the things that Micah had made, they went and attacked Laish. That town of peaceful, quiet people, which was in the same valley as Beth Rehob, they killed the inhabitants and burned the town. There was no one to save them because Laish was a long way from Sidon, and they had no dealings with any other people. The Danites rebuilt the town and settled down there. So, so people would ask, did the tribe of Dan have the right to kill the citizens of Laish? Absolutely not. God had commanded Israel to clean out and destroy certain cities because of their idolatry and wickedness. But Laish did not fall under that judgment. It was not within the assigned boundaries of Dan either. and its people were peaceful in contrast to the warlike Canaanites. But the tribe of Dan had no regard for God's law. God's law said to destroy a city for idolatry, right? Deuteronomy 13. The Danites themselves were guilty of this sin. This story shows how far some of the tribes had wandered away from the teachings of God. So just because the Danites successfully defeated Laish does not mean their actions were right. Their idolatry, their idolatry actually showed that God was not guiding them. Today, many justify their wrong actions by outward signs of success. They think that wealth, popularity, or lack of suffering is an indication of God's blessing. But you know what? Many stories in the Bible indicate that evil and earthly success can go hand in hand. Um, we're going to look at Second Kings chapter 14. You can look at it at your convenience if you want to, but Second Kings chapter 14, verse 25 to 29 speaks about this. Success does not indicate God's approval. Do not use your personal success or lack of as a measuring rod for whether you are pleasing God or not. Okay, let's see here. I want to make sure we don't miss anything. Okay, we can go on. Here we go. They changed its name from Laish to Dan, after their ancestor Dan, the son of Jacob. The Danites set up the idol to be worshipped, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom and grandson of Moses, served as a priest for the Danites. And his descendants served as their priests until the people were taken away into exile. Micah's idol remained there as long as the tent where God was worshipped remained at Shiloh. So, what we got here, first and foremost, if maybe some of you don't remember, but when we went to the book of Kings, there was a guy named Jeroboam, right? Jeroboam, who was allegedly, actually, technically, he was the most evil king ever to take care of or be a king over the nation of Israel. The reason he was so evil, because he was promised 10 by the prophet. He was promised 10 of the lands of the tribes of Israel. You know, God promised him, be good and you'll have these. But what Jeroboam did, since he didn't want his people going down to Judah to worship God at the tabernacle, he instituted two different shrines. One in the city of Dan, right here that we're talking about, and one down on the border of Judah and Israel. So it's kind of symbolic that in this city of Dan, they already installed this false worship center, if you will. And then Jeroboam in the book of Kings is really going to take advantage of this area. So what can I tell you about this? Even though the people of Dan are removed by a great distance from the fellow Israelites, remember, Dan is way, way up north. They want to remember who they are and to whom they are related, right? So they renamed the captured city after their forefather Dan. This location now becomes the northwest extremity of the promised land. And the expression that you hear throughout the Bible, from Dan to Beersheba, which means from the very north to the very south, is meant to encompass all of Israel. So now we have, with the pilfered priest and idols, the tribe of Dan sets up their own place of worship. Idolatry had been practiced privately for many years, but this is the first publicly acknowledged site of worship to be established as a rival to Shiloh. Remember, Shiloh is where the tabernacle that's actually located. It remains a sanctuary for idol worship until the time of captivity. This captivity, no doubt, refers to the time when the Ark of the Covenant was taken from Shiloh, not the most publicized exile of Israel to Babylon. Now, the probable writer of Judges would not have been alive at that time. Now, remember Jeroboam? So here's the situation. Later, Jeroboam, the king of Israel, he set up a golden calf, in the very place where Dan housed Micah's idols. Jeroboam did this as extra incentive to keep the northern tribes from traveling south to worship in Jerusalem after the split between Judah and the rest of the tribes of Israel. So, this place, in case you want to go to it now in 2026, this place is now known as Tel El Kadi, which means a mound of the judge. It rises 30 to 80 feet above the plain in a rectangular shape, 700 by 1500 feet around the outer edges. Only surface excavations have been carried out so far. But what has been found is promising that it is one of the most challenging sites in all of biblical lands. So, let's see here. We're done. Let me give me a minute. Let me go get a drink of water, please. Okay, hold on. Okay. Okay, I'm back. Now, so now that we talked about Micah and the tribe of Dan, it's going to get uglier. The next chapter gets really, this is the highest point of depravity that Israel's going to go through. So, okay, let's start here. I want to make sure I have the right page. So, chapter 19, and for that matter, from chapter 19 to the end of chapter 21. What is the significance of this tragic story we're going to read? Well, when the Israelites' faith in God disintegrated, their unity as a nation also disintegrated. They could have taken complete possession of the land if they had obeyed God, right? And trusted Him to keep His promise. But when they forgot Him, they lost their purpose, and soon all the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. When they stopped letting God lead them, they became no better than the evil people around them. When they made laws for their own benefit, they set standards far below God's. When you leave God out of your life, you may be shocked at what you are capable of doing. So let's start 19. In those days before Israel had a king, there was a Levite living far back in the hill country of Ephraim. He took a young woman from Bethlehem in Judah to be his concubine. So, having concubines was an accepted part of the Israelite society, although this is not what God intended. A concubine had more of the duties but only some of the privilege of a wife. Although she was legally attached to one man, she and her children usually did not have the inheritance rights of the legal wife and legitimate children. A concubine's primary purpose was giving the man sexual pleasure, bearing additional children, and contributing more help to the household or estate. Concubines were often foreign prisoners of war, but they could also be Israelites, as was probably the case in this story. But we'll see right now. 2. But she became angry with him, went back to her father's house in Bethlehem, and stayed there 4 months. Then the man decided to go after her and try to persuade her to return to him. He took his servant and 2 donkeys with him. The woman showed the Levite into the house, and when her father saw him, he gave him a hearty greeting. The father insisted that he stay, and so he stayed for 3 days. The couple had their meals and spent the nights there. On the morning of the 4th day, they woke up early and got ready to go. But the woman's father said to the Levite, Have something to eat first. You'll feel better. You can go later. So the two men sat down and ate and drank together. Then the woman's father told him, "Please spend the night and enjoy yourself." The Levite got up to go, but the father urged him to stay. So he spent another night there. Early in the morning of the fifth day, he started to leave. But the woman's father said, "Eat something, please. Wait until later in the day." So the two men ate together. Notice I said the two men ate together. I'll tell you about something about that in a second. When the man, his concubine, and the servant once more started to leave, the father said, "Look, it is almost evening now. You might as well stay all night. It'll be dark soon. Stay here and have a good time. Tomorrow you can get up early for the trip and go home." So the eating and drinking would be done only by the two men. What about the concubine? Well, at that time, women ate their meals separately. Entrapped by the hospitality of his host, the Levite lingered for several days. Now, on the fifth day, the Levite was stopped once again by the insistence of the girl's father and his own indecision, but finally separated himself at what the father in law calls the pitching time of day, meaning when travelers ordinarily pitch their tents and prepare for nightfall. The problem related in the next few pages might have been averted if the unfortunate Levite had just acted with more resolve and left when he originally intended. There is a danger and a weakness in allowing ourselves to be talked into something against our better judgment. Okay, let me see. Okay, we can go. But the man did not want to spend another night there, so he and his concubine started on their way with their servant and the two donkeys with packed saddles. It was late in the day when they came near Jebus, that is Jerusalem. So the servant said to his master, "Why don't we stop and spend the night here in this Jebusite city?" But his master said, "We're not going to stop in a city where the people are not Israelites. We'll pass on by and go a little farther and spend that night at Gibeah or Ramah." So they passed by Jebus, continued on their way. It was sunset when they came to Gibeah, in the territory of the tribe of Benjamin. They turned off the road to go and spend the night there. They went into town and sat down in the city square, but no one offered to take them home for the night. So it was what you would say a fatal misjudgment to assume that Gibeah would be safer because it was an Israelite town. The Levite and his concubine could scarcely have gotten any worse than they did. People who belong to God in name only can inflict just as much cruelty and fall just as deeply into bad behavior as the worst barbarians. Gibeah, this town that we're talking about, Gibeah, was 4 miles northwest of Jerusalem. At this time, there was no inns or public accommodations available. Strangers had to rely on private hospitality. Most people in this part of the world were generous and willingly opened their doors to travelers, offering to share whatever they had. So it was very unusual that this couple did not receive even one invitation to spend the night. However, when we read of the bad character of the citizens of this town, it is no wonder that simple graces have been abandoned. One indication of our spiritual maturity is our eagerness to offer hospitality. Let's continue here. While they were there, an old man came by at the end of a day's work on the farm. He was originally from the hill country of Ephraim, but he was now living in Gibeah. The other people there were from the tribe of Benjamin. The old man noticed the traveler in the city square and asked him, "Where do you come from? Where are you going?" The Levite answered, "We have been in Bethlehem in Judah, and now we are on our way home, deep in the hill country of Ephraim. No one will put us up for the night, even though we have fodder and straw for our donkeys, as well as bread and wine for my concubine and me, and for my servant. We have everything we need. The old man said, "You are welcome in my home. I will take care of you. You don't have to spend the night in the square." So he took them home with him and fed their donkeys with guests. His guests washed their feet and had a meal. So it seems pretty good so far. Either the old man feels that it is a disgrace to the reputation of the town that a stranger should go uninvited for the night, or he is aware, because of the reputation of the townspeople, of the danger in remaining unprotected in the public square. But really doesn't matter because he urges them to come to his home. The Levite has already declared that they had enough provisions for the journey, so they would not have to impose upon their host for anything but just simply lodging. They were carrying their own rations, and for the donkeys, he would have been well supplied with chopped straw and balls of bran and barley meal. So, nowhere in the unwritten law of hospitality stronger in the Middle East. Even in ancient times, protecting a guest of any cost ranked at the top of a person's code of honor. But here the hospitality code was gravely misapplied, allowing the rape and abuse of this woman, you're going to see next, has become preferable to even the possibility of a conflict between a guest and a neighbor. The two men were selfish. You're going to see what's going to happen. The two men were very selfish, the old man and the Levite. Okay, let's continue. They were enjoying themselves when all of a sudden some sexual perverts from the town surrounded the house and started beating on the door. They said to the old man, "Bring out that man that came home with you. We want to have relations with him." But the old man went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, please don't do such an evil, immoral thing. This man is my guest. Look, here is his concubine and my own virgin daughter. I will bring them out now, and you can have them. Do whatever you want to with them, but do not do such an awful thing to this man." But the man would not listen to him. So the Levite took his concubine and put her outside with them. They raped her and abused her all night long and did not stop until morning. So, very, very bad situation here that we have. So, what we have here, the literal interpretation calls the wicked men who surround the house sons of Satan. They have abandoned all sense of right, honor, and decency. But even more shocking than the heinous actions of the townspeople is the inexplicable conduct of the old man and the Levite, whom we expect to maintain a higher standard. Although not stooping on the level of their depraved neighbors, they propose to compromise. The virginity of their own daughter and concubine reflect a whole different level of corruption. The old man from Ephraim found himself in a situation much like Lot did with Sodom and Gomorrah. Both were good men in the middle of a vile and corrupt community. Both invited vulnerable visitors to spend the night. Both their homes were surrounded by depraved citizens wanting to violate innocent guests. Both offered their own daughters to calm down the crowd so that their visitors could remain unbothered. Now, homosexuality is not simply a personal choice to follow one's own natural inclination. God has made it clear that this behavior is a violation of his laws, set up to ensure that we experience the best that he has to offer. Homosexuality is an immoral act that often has dangerous, unhealthful ramifications. It is treated in Scripture with great severity, yet it is also like every other perversion that starts with something good that God has created, but people make it into something evil. So let's continue here. At dawn, the woman came and fell down at the door of the old man's house, where her husband was. She was still there when daylight came. Her husband got up that morning, and when he opened the door to go on his way, he found his concubine lying in front of the house, with her hand reaching for the door. He said, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. So he put her body across a donkey and started on his way home. When he arrived, he went into the house, got a knife. He took his concubine's body, cut it into 12 pieces, and sent one piece to each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, "We have never heard of such a thing. Nothing like this has ever happened since the Israelites left Egypt. We have to do something about this. What will it be?" So, hmm. So after sending his concubine through an experience that brought about her death, the Levite reacts indifferently to her form, collapsed in agony at the door. However, he is stirred enough to undertake the gruesome task of dismembering her body and sending a piece to each tribe, ensuring that the cruelty taken out on her will not go unpunished. Now, it is uncertain whether the people who received her limbs were horrified at the sight of the mutilated body, or if they were reacting to the story of the rape and murder when they said that no such deed has been done here. Judges 19, verse 30. But the whole nation speaks out in readiness to do whatever is necessary to rectify this problem. So sometimes the very best things that can happen to us is to suddenly be made aware of the scandalous straits into which we have fallen. This may not occur until we reach rock bottom. That's the problem. And finally, when we see what we have become, shocking as it may be, when the enormity of our sins seems to be unparalleled, God can use our disgusting behavior, if we allow Him to, as the catalyst to get us back on track. God is not oblivious to the suffering of any individual. Don't think that. God knows what's going on, even though He may sometimes wonder where He is and why He has allowed it. That's what some people always figure. Where is God? Where is He? Why am I going through this? So that was chapter 19. Let me see here.